Let's talk today about the potential futures of humanity. And let's start with energy first. We're already seeing a transition towards renewable or nuclear or some other type of energy. Um, Fossil fuels have been very useful to humanity. They've allowed for the Industrial Revolution to happen. But now it is definitely time to look for alternate sources of energy, alternative, renewable, um, maybe something that might just be staring us in the face. When it comes to potential paths for the future, energy is definitely one big sector that'll change. Probably that will probably change. But maybe another big one might be how we communicate as well. We're already shifting our communication methods uh, from body language to verbal, language to digital, right? Which is still language, but it has less of the complexity of human speech, for example. Like actually physically being in the room with somebody else and listening to them. So, in that way, communication will probably keep on changing. Um, in what form? It might be direct neural connections, it might be, yeah, that's probably the most likely. Something like direct access, direct brain internet interface, something like that. Um, Although I'm not sure how that will evolve over time. But it is certainly interesting to think about. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about how all these disciplines are kind of merging, coalescing together. For example, health and architecture, which seem like two totally different fields, are actually kind of merging together. Because architecture is what's really what might be one of the possible futures for architecture is living architecture, right? Something that grows and heals on its own. So almost like how our skin heals whenever we get a cut or whenever we get a bruise, right? We might have living homes, right? Self-healing concrete, self-healing cement, self-healing homes, maybe in the future. And in that way, architecture is actually getting closer and closer to health, right? Health and well-being. So in the future, there might be a sort of a merging of medicine with um, infrastructure, right? They might become one thing. It's similar to how things we develop for sustainability, right? Sustainability, net zero, regenerative farming, regenerative agriculture. Those practices can be implemented for space colonization, right? Because for space colonization, we really need something that's durable. We need a habitat and basically a whole system, a way of living that's totally self-reliant and sustainable, right? Because the Mars colony, Venus colony, asteroid colony, right? Whatever colony will have to sustain itself, right, for long periods of time without any resupply, right? Because the resupply would also take a long period of time. So that would probably require a lot of automation, robots, AI, but it could also be in the form of like bioengineering, right? For example, like a plant that grows into a home, for example, right? Or more likely something like, yeah, we'll probably use some sort of fungi, algae, single-celled or maybe bacteria um, that can take the contents of a different planet and turn it into things that we humans can utilize. Whatever helps us live sustainably with nature on Earth will help us colonize other planets as well. Although I do have to say, colonizing is a bit of a loaded term. Yeah, it's a very political term. Maybe I should say exploration, perhaps. But it is very interesting how all these technologies kind of influence and merge together. So I guess kind of just a simple roadmap for the future of humanity. I'm not. This isn't like an ultimate master plan or anything, but kind of what may happen is first we develop something like more abundant energy sources, right, which allow us to do more things, right, like more computation, more intelligence, right, more data processing, which in turn will help us automate processes of bioengineering, biomachines, nanomachines, right? Which then in turn would become, catalysts for like a circular, something like a circular economy, regenerative economy, right? Regenerative, basically just a sustainable way of living with Earth, right? And then using that technology, we can then live on other planets as well. What form that system would take place probably would depend from person to person, planet to planet. It might not even be a person. It might just be an artificial life form, right? Like a totally engineered life form. It could be like a machine life hybrid, like a cyborg. And even the definitions of machine and life are starting to blur together, right? Because, for example, with humans, we augment ourselves with glasses, right? Cell phones, cars, planes, right? So, are we more machine or are we more biological? And what does it mean to be biological or mechanical, right? The definitions are starting to blur. So perhaps one day they'll become one thing, right? Machines will be life, and vice versa. Life will be machines, perhaps. It does seem, and then from there on, probably, I'm just guessing. I'm guessing the next frontier beyond space would probably actually be the human, the mind, the mental. You can call it spiritual, but the actual consciousness or experience. I think there was a famous quote. The I'm totally gonna butcher the quote, but it's something like the two biggest mysteries in the world, the universe or the human mind, and I'm not sure which is more mysterious. I'm guessing that's sort of the path, quote unquote path, humanity is going to take in the future, if and when there's a future. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about. For example, if we augment ourselves to the point of, let's say, like something to maybe, I'm trying to think of something, some sort of sci-fi, I guess almost transhuman species. Would we be considered humanity at that point, right? Would we be considered Homo sapiens? Even now, well, we still have we have a lot in common with our ancestors. Uh, making jokes about making dick jokes and like drawing graffiti in public bathrooms, saying yo mama jokes. That's as old as civilization. Make complaining about taxes. That's as old as like Mesopotamia. So there's a lot of things that we still have in common with our ancestors, but if we get to a point of almost transcending our humanity, would we still be considered human, right? That's another kind of like interesting question. What would we even really consider our descendants? For example, would our domesticated animals be considered our descendants, right? Because in a way, they're like our children, right? In a way, any uh, pet owner, right? Somebody who loves their pets would say they're no, they're like their children, right? So if we kind of extend that definition further, right, would our machines be considered our children, right? Would AI be considered our children? There's the whole question about, is AI conscious? That's a before we tackle that question, we have to tackle, right, is AI intelligent? Right? What is intelligence, right? Before we tackle the question of consciousness, right, which is like the ultimate question, uh, we'll have to tackle intelligence, right? What is intelligence? um, and that's another whole can of worms. So it's it's interesting though. It is definitely interesting. Sometimes I wonder if we'll make our stories and mythologies come true in reality. Like dragons, for example. If we become sophisticated enough in bioengineering, we could make a dragon. Right? So even though they might be false at the moment, they may become true later on. Or maybe we may create a sort of digital heaven, right? Like a VR heaven. We might create a sort of I know there's a lot of Black Mirror episodes about these topics, but it really does make me think.